It's great to welcome to the program today Allison Butler, who's a contributor to The Media and Me, a guide to critical media literacy for young people, and also the director of the Media Literacy Certificate Program at my undergraduate alma mater, the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. Allison, it's really great having you on. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much. I'm really excited to be here.
So, I guess let's just start with something. It's a simple question. The answer may not be so simple, but it's something I talk about a lot. Media literacy, I think, should start being taught at the latest in seventh grade to everybody. Probably fifth grade is even better. It's pretty rare, particularly that public schools have media literacy programs. Is it as simple as it's just not a priority to those creating the curricula, or is there more to why it's not commonly taught?
I think there's more commonly taught, and I would, raise your fifth to seventh grade to say we need to start an early childhood education. Our children are exposed to the media within, immediately. And certainly with social media, we can learn a lot about them before they're born. Their identities are out there really early on. I think. Yes, it is something that is really can be understood to be difficult to add to the curriculum. And part of the reason why it's difficult is we don't have formal training, formal education for people who want to teach media literacy. So oftentimes teachers have to kind of figure it out on their own, and goodness knows they have enough to do. So to ask them to add more is arduous. Part of our work, part of my work is to say we need teacher education in media literacy.
Yeah, that's interesting because I remember that there were these kind of one-off classes in middle and high school that were interesting. I remember one called like Transportation, Power, and Energy, which was really interesting. It didn't really fit anywhere, and the teacher who taught it was not certainly an expert in that field and sort of had to figure it out as he went. And so it does seem that part of the problem, as you're pointing out, is it's not common that the teacher base is necessarily equipped to teach media literacy.
Correct. I talk with teachers all the time who say that they're really interested in bringing in the study of the media to their classrooms, particularly because they see how glued to their devices their students are, but then they're at a loss for how to teach it formally. I think also sometimes, like you mentioned, these kind of one off classes, they can often be seen as like what you get to do when you're done with what you're supposed to be
Yes,
studying.
yes, yes, absolutely.
Which is sure, that's I mean, there's value in that, right? There's absolute value in that. I wouldn't say that that was that's a bad idea, but I do think it's bad if it's the only way that we're teaching it because our media are so infused in our lives. Why would we then think about educating them as like an add-on or as something to do when you're done the important stuff?
By the time people get to you, so at the college level, what do you find are the most common blind spots in being able to look at media and think about it critically in terms of, we often hear really young kids can't tell the difference between advertising and content, for example, or people can't necessarily distinguish between whether they're watching news or opinion programming is a more common one for older people. What are the most common blind spots by the time people are college age and get to you?
I mean, I'd say there's probably 2 really big ones that can then branch out into so many more. One, for the most part, by the time they get to me, they're pretty good at understanding the content, but they don't know where that content comes from. They don't know the power behind the content, and that's part of a lot of the work that I do and that my colleagues and I do in the media and me is say it's not just about what's on the screen or just what we're hearing. The actual powers behind the scenes. We have to talk about ownership, production, and distribution. And I'd say connected to that, but the other big area is, again, by the time students come to my classroom as college students, freshmen through seniors, they're really invested in media. They're involved in a lot of media. They have multiple social media accounts, but have no clue where their information is going. Social media is a huge tool of surveillance, massive amounts of data gathering. Probably safe to say that most, if not all of us, Zip through those terms of service, zip through those privacy documents. Don't read the truly, truly fine print and all the paragraphs of legalese. We sign off on them. It's the only way that we have access to these platforms. And yet we have no idea where our information is going, what's happening to it. The one clue that we get is often as soon as we search for something, quite quickly after that, an advertisement for that very thing will pop up. We gave away the data that let that happen.
Do
And I think
you
that's pretty dangerous.
do you find that over the last 10 years, the usage of social media among 18 to 22-year-olds has changed in any appreciable way? I mean, one of the things I've read is that on average, people's use of Facebook is going in the direction of fewer friends and tending towards people you really know rather than a larger circle of friends. So like that's a change in terms of average Facebook use. But do you see that the 18 to 22-year-olds are thinking of their social media presences differently than maybe a decade ago?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think maybe some of what's going on with young people in Facebook is that I mean, once people my age got onto Facebook, it became a lot less interesting for young people. And, now that grandma's there, right, it kind of
Right.
makes it less fun, I guess. So I understand from my students that they use something like Facebook almost more for like school connections or school projects as a way of connecting with people. But I think that in terms of their own personal use of social media, it's a source of anxiety, that it's meant, at least at some points, for them to be fun and, as its name, for it to be social, but it can be remarkably antisocial. You're often pretty isolated with it. And certainly some of those comparisons against the beautiful airbrushed images are incredibly difficult. Uh, but they're also entering a world where they're expected to know how to use this professionally. And so that anxiety is not just about self, but it's also about their preparation for their future, and what's like sort of what's to come next. And I think in some ways, like all of us do with certain areas of our life, is that young people can kind of become their own worst enemies. They will be upset or concerned about, once it's introduced to them, about some of these surveillance technologies. But one of the biggest things that's happening these days is that young people use the Find My app, where they are constantly tracking where their friends are. And what I
Right.
hear from my students is they use it so that when they don't text a friend back, their friend knows it's because they're in a class where they're not supposed to have their phones on. So, as much as they might get frustrated by being surveilled, they also are participating in that.
Speaking of phones in class, I last taught as an adjunct at Boston College in 2017, and it was a once a week class. So it was just like, listen, we're here once a week. I don't want to see any phones, period. Just absolutely no phones. They're on laptops. I don't know what they're doing on the laptops. I don't really want to get involved in that, but it was just like there should never be a phone that's out. How much of an active distraction is, whether they're on social media or not, the phones in the classroom right now? What's your sense of that?
Oh, I think they're a huge distraction. It's so hard for us not to look at our phones. I actually have a policy in my class that unless there is a documented accommodation need, no cell phones, no computers, and stop looking at your smartwatches. That we're here to discuss ideas. There's no tests in my class, there's no final exam. This is about engaging with each other and engaging with our discussions. And most of them can't really put their phones away. They sort of turn them over on their desks.
Yeah.
I will watch them get up and leave the room for a few moments, and I'm assuming they're checking their phones, but they don't want to get like caught checking it in class. And at the end, there's stress about that, and some of them do get frustrated with me. But at the end of the semester, the consistent commentary I get is, "This is the one class I actually paid attention to." Because I couldn't be distracted.
That's interesting. That's interesting. To get kind of back to the media literacy part, a couple other things to talk about. When it comes to how do I identify a trustworthy source? Anybody who's been in this field any length of time, we know about all of the things that are often said, and they tend to involve research. They tend to involve, it's not, oh, hey, here's an article I just found. I'm in 30 seconds going to be able to do all of the things that on paper we often say, here's how you identify whether a source is trustworthy. What's the lowest hanging fruit that any news consumer can employ to try to suss out whether an article or a video clip or whatever the case may be is coming from a source that can be trusted?
I think the first thing to do is an author mentioned? Because if an author isn't mentioned, who knows how that got put together? It could be PR. Do you know the website, right? Does it end? Look closely at the website because websites are easily manipulated. So you could have like, New York Times dash com dot Gmail or,
Yeah.
wait, and then you're like, wait, I saw the New York Times, but then it's something totally different, right? So truly look at the ending of the website, almost even of the URL, almost before looking at the beginning. Does it look like a real website? Can you get back to that article without I mean, look at everything is going to have pop-up ads, but if it's the ones that are just like overtaking your screen, can you learn more about the author? You don't have to like what they say, but can you actually learn more about this person? And if not, I would be suspicious about whether or not that person is either actually a person, or if potentially a bot or so on and so forth, or if it's somebody who's kind of hiding behind some other sort of idea or some other sort of message. So those would be the absolute first things. I would also say be really cautious about, maybe the next level would be really cautious about what you click on social media. Social media platforms are not news platforms. We can share news on them, but they are not news platforms. So if we, like if we talk to young people who say like, oh, I get most of my news from Twitter. Well, no, you don't. You get information on Twitter that somebody might have shared
Right.
that might be news,
You're
but
finding
it is
links on
not
Twitter.
news.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're finding links on Twitter.
Another thing that seems critical that I tell people is make an attempt to get to the primary source if there actually is one, because there's there will be situations where, not to pick on any of these particular news outlets, but you'll see a raw story article with a headline and it will quote Newsweek. It's actually a Newsweek article that they are summarizing and editorializing. You go to the Newsweek article and Newsweek actually says as reported by the Washington Post. And so
Right.
drilling down to where did this actually come from seems like a fundamental first step in evaluating it, because really all raw story might be doing is rewriting an article. You can't really ascertain the truth of the matter. You can ascertain whether it's honestly rewritten, but not the underlying reporting. And so finding the primary source seems really important. A lot of people may not realize the difference between a rewritten blog style article and the reporting.
Yep, absolutely. And that's true. I mean, I think one thing you're absolutely right, is who is being sourced and are sources being named? Are those the primary sources? If something says something to the effect of like research shows, well, where's that research?
Yeah.
I might not be able to distill the research myself that quickly, but I should be able to access the research. I also think that especially in the previous presidential administration, the idea of unnamed sources, right? What does it mean for a source to go unnamed? For some stories, that is really legitimate. There are dangerous issues why somebody's name out there could be a problem, but for others, it's a kind of a circuitous route around citing your sources. So part of our work in the media, me, and part of our work in critical media literacy is evidence-based research. We want to provide evidence ourselves, and we want people to be looking for evidence themselves.
There was even confusion during the Trump era of, when we talk about an anonymous source, are they known to the reporter? And there were countless instances where people misunderstood that even the reporter didn't know who the person was. When the reporter did, it's just they weren't naming them. And that's a critical difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%.
We've been speaking with Allison Butler, contributor to The Media and Me, a guide to critical media literacy for young people, also director of the Media Literacy Certificate Program at UMass. Allison, really great having you on. I appreciate your time.
Thanks so much, David. It was great chatting with you.